or they'll see someone's head spin like literally completely around in between their shoulder blades, you know, looking at them with their eyes back in their head and foaming
Really?
at the mouth. And
You've
yeah, oh
heard
yeah.
that? Wow.
Yeah, no, this happens.
One, bam, and we're live. So Justin, as I've already said, it's an immense pleasure. We've been intending to do it for 2 weeks. Would that be correct?
Yes.
For 2 weeks. And had I been a bit more careful and cognizant of my food choices, we would have done it a week ago, and I hadn't been food poisoned. But well,
Yeah,
you know,
very
sometimes.
sorry to hear. I've had food poisoning.
Oh yes,
It's
well,
awful.
gluttony, right? Gluttony it is, right? Yeah, we've all got our vices, so to speak, and it's an interesting topic. You are admittedly the first exorcist with whom I'm taking the pleasure of talking, and I'd like to get into that. And besides that, I'm pretty uneducated on this topic, so you would have to explain to me maybe a little bit historically how this whole practice of exorcism has come about. But before that, so being an exorcist and also a blind exorcist, I'd like, if that's not a personal topic, I'd like to get into a little bit how you've got this condition of yours. Was it something innate? Were you born with that, or did it happen during you were born like that, right?
No, actually I wasn't. So for you and for your audience, I am blind. I cannot see anything. I have type 1 diabetes, and in 1977, we're going way back in time there, I was 5 years old, and I contracted type 1 diabetes. They don't know why. At age 16, I received my driver's license, very happy, just being that teenager, finally got their independence, their freedom, can drive to their friends, can go out on dates, all of that fun stuff. And I started to develop an eye condition. My eyes kept tearing and itching, so I went to an optometrist, and he said that I had diabetic retinopathy. This is a condition where your eyes bleed in the back of your eyes from high blood sugars. And they didn't know that at the time, that it was caused from high blood sugars. They just said it was from diabetes. So within a year, I'd lost my eyesight. I was blinded from the laser treatments. They would shoot laser in the back of my eyes to cauterize the bleeding blood vessels. And this was done manually. And so this was in probably 1988. So this is being done manually, and they had pretty much blinded me from the laser, plus the combination of the diabetic retinopathy. So in about a year, from 16, I went from complete independence and driving. At 17, completely blind, and my life had drastically changed because I had went from a normal kind of middle-class North American kid to now a minority. So it was a drastic change.
Yeah, if you don't mind elaborating a bit on the psychological condition, must have been devastating, right? From a person who
Very
could see
much
to...
so.
Yeah.
Very
Was
much
it
so.
like a total loss, right? Like 100%?
100%.
Wow.
So, but slowly over time. So I gradually lost it bit by bit to where I couldn't see at nighttime, and eventually had to hold on to people's shoulders and arms to get around, to complete loss of eyesight. And so the transition from, being blind, sighted to being blind was very challenging for me. And it's at that point in my life that I really begin to, seek God, to seek Christ. And that is at 19 years old is when I actually became a Christian. And that's was my initial way to handle the trauma, eventually through counseling, also adaptive training, where I learned to use a cane, how to cook independently, how to use computers. I eventually went to university for a degree in computer programming. I met my wife there. She is sighted. She was going for a master's in clinical counseling. So I graduated with a computer degree, computer programming, and I immediately started programming business applications, and it's been a wild ride.
Oh, yeah, most certainly has, and I mean to get into that right in a pretty short time. Do you think it would have been harder for you had you not found Jesus? How much different would your story have been, you think?
I think,
in terms of your ability to put up with difficulties like that.
I think I would have not made it. I probably eventually. I don't know. I don't think suicide would have been an option for me, but I definitely think I would have died from addiction and things like that.
Were there thoughts of this kind at that point? Something fatal must have crossed your mind, honestly speaking.
You mean during the loss of my eyesight?
Yeah, during that initial stage.
Actually, it really didn't. It absolutely, I was depressed. Absolutely, I was traumatized, laying in bed crying and all that, right, for a while till I could get counseling and process through it and so forth. So, but the thought of killing myself never crossed my mind. It just never did. I was always had hope and belief in Christ that even though I was blind, I could live a normal life. I just had that faith and believed that inside of me. I don't know if that was a gift from God or what, but like even when I went to university, I graduated with honors. And I was their first blind student to go through the computer science department. So it was very challenging, tons of discrimination, inflexible people, very black and white thinkers. So very challenging to get through university. So, but to answer your question, no, I just always had this hope that, why can't I live a normal life? And thanks to God, I believe that is who helped me, Christ, get through, opening doors that never could have been opened, getting me in companies that I had no business getting in with, training me in skill sets. Like for today, for those of your audience watching that are into tech, might be computer programmers, I work in Azure, I work in the cloud, I work with Kubernetes, I primarily program microservices in Azure. And so, working with pipelines, all these deployments, all these sort of things. So it's been a very successful life, but with you have to have determination,
You being a person of faith, a believer, what do you make out of that argument from the other team of people, the non-believers that is, who say quite often, who use this sort of an argument that mostly God is found and Jesus is met and found in a trying time, in a testing time, in a time of some sort of ordeal and challenge, because they tend to use this argument as some sort of an indicator that, well, that's like an escape, like a gateway for people who are suffering and struggling. That's usually where they find faith.
Absolutely, it's a gateway. And a wonderful one.
And
right?
It should be, right?
Yeah, I would rather have that than be hooked on heroin or whatever people might get into to cope with pain, because we all cope with pain. Like, we are human beings, we all suffer, we all go through trauma, and it's how do we handle that trauma to come out in a positive fashion. And you will find that a lot of people who have severe trauma, like I know of a woman that's a paraplegic, she dove into the water, hit her head, and at a very young age became a paraplegic. She could not, she was, bedbound for the rest of her life. Right. She also used Christ and is still living and has a very powerful story, goes around as motivational speakers and helps people and things like that. So there are many people which we'll get in this later, who find Christ not because of things like physical problems, like a cancer, blindness, paraplegic, things like that, but because, in fact, of demons.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that's interesting. That gives me a nice excuse to get into it.
Yes.
Just for a couple more seconds, I have admittedly repeated this phrase a couple of times. Perhaps perhaps those 5 loyal listeners and viewers of my YouTube channel, they will blame me for repeating this phrase, but I say it's a beautiful phrase that was said by my favorite guitar player, John Frusciante of Red Hot Chili Peppers. He said that everybody has got a hole in a heart size of God, and everybody fills that hole differently. So I just want to say that, to me, the argument that people find God in the most trying, testing, ordeal moments, that is not an excuse. That doesn't serve a reason why religion is weak. It's just that it must be like that. Maybe not always, right? Because, it's nice to thank God. And I say thank God, admittedly, not even being devoted religious person, but I say it's nice to thank God when things are fine, when things are going nicely.
And there are plenty of people who find God when things are perfectly fine. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It just depends, I know people who are extremely wealthy who found God in the midst of all of their success. And there was no trauma.
But
it was just
would you say, as a prerequisite to find God, should there be some void preliminary? Should there be some sort of urgency?
I think so, because I think that's what everyone's doing in life. And I see this so often as an exorcist. Everybody has a void. Everyone has been through trauma, and we're going to try to fill that some way. For one person, it's becoming the best athlete they can be. For another person, it's becoming the best CEO of a company that they can be. So they're all, and then for others, it's getting into supernatural practices to try to heal themselves and to become a better person.
Yeah.
And so there's, I think the void, bottom line, is universal. I just do. I think, and yeah.
Well, right. You mentioned the word demons. Tell me if demons are real.
I will. And let me share a little bit, because I am a Christian exorcist, right? So I have a Christian worldview perspective. And I just want to step through a little bit of the theology, and I'm going to answer your question through explaining some of this briefly, because then we can transition into what everyone wants to hear about. The spinning heads, the green pea vomit, the the levitation, things vanishing, all that sort of stuff. I mean, that's why people have clicked on your video, right?
Yeah, but, most realistically, of course.
Yeah. So let me explain from a Christian perspective how we believe, what we believe about Satan, what we believe about demons, because that's going to play into why is there exorcism. And I think it's important, like you mentioned in the beginning, to have some kind of historical understanding so that, so people can understand, what is this exorcism, where did it come from, when did it start, all these sorts of things. So in the Christian mindset, in the Christian religion, in the theology of Christianity, and by the way, as I share this, feel free to disagree. I respect people for who they are, where they're at in life, what they believe. I'm definitely not one to debate people and all that. It's just, that's not me. But I at least approach this as educational. So, again, you don't have to agree with it at all, but at least it'll give you the understanding of Christian exorcists and why we do what we do. So in the Christian religion, we believe that there are only two sources of power: God and Satan. That's it. So it greatly simplifies things, and on one hand, when it comes to exorcism and demons. So we believe that there is God, and we believe that there's Satan. We also believe in Deuteronomy chapter 18. For those who aren't a Christian, you can Google Christian Bible online, and you can look at Deuteronomy 18. That's chapter 18, verses 9 through 12. And in here, God lists out behaviors that he forbids. And it's interesting what he lists out. He says, basically, I'll put this in my own words. The following things are forbidden, and he finds them detestable. He greatly disapproves of them because it takes the focus from him who loves us and cares about us and directs it towards something else to find, your future with it, and so forth. Now, again, this is theology. Feel free to disagree. But the things he lists that he says are not good, do not do them, are things like witchcraft, sorcery, divination, talking to the dead, channeling, and things along these lines. So in that book of Deuteronomy, he is telling the Jewish people, when you go into the lands that I'm giving you, these people practice these. And they burn their children, they sacrifice children, and they have sorcery, they have channelers, they have witches, they have all these things, and they're very bad because ultimately they harm you. Now, to my Wiccan listeners and everyone else, my apologies. I know that sounds offensive, but by all means, again, view this as educational, not combative. So, we have these practices listed in the Old Testament of things not to do because God believes that they are evil and they keep us from being connected with him. So, Satan, to answer your question now, Satan and demons in the Christian religion, we believe that Lucifer was created a godly being. He was a very high angel in heaven, responsible for worship and glorifying God. At a certain point in time, he became prideful and said, I will be like God and sit above him. So at that point, God expelled him from heaven because of the pride. And most theologians believe that a third of the angels went with him. And there is this in the book of Revelation, chapter 12. You can look at that chapter. Right around verse 4, it starts talking about how the great dragon was cast out of heaven, which is symbolic of Satan, and his tail brought with him a third of the stars. That's what most Christian theologians believe the demons are, those stars. A revelation is all pictorial for concrete meaning, so it's something just to understand. So most Christians believe that the demons initially were angels. They joined the rebellion with Lucifer against God to overtake him. God expels them out of heaven, and the demons come down to earth, and they are the ones who start teaching people the practices to keep them away from God, things like sorcery, divination, witchcraft, channeling, because they want Lucifer to be worshipped. They want to keep them from finding God because that's where their salvation is through Christ, is through God, and so forth. So, and I'm almost done here. At an eventual point in time, Jesus Christ comes. Most people know about Jesus Christ. Some believe he's a prophet. Christians, and the theology of Christian, we believe that he was God in the flesh, and that he came and he died on the cross for our sins so that we can accept him, follow his teachings, so that when we die, we can go to heaven because his blood is what protects us and allows us to come into heaven. For some reason, God requires blood for the forgiveness of sins. In the Old Testament, it was something that was very sacred, so they would sacrifice specific animals to repent for their sins and so forth. So he said the ultimate sacrifice is coming. Again, we're talking theology here. which would be Jesus Christ. And he would be the ultimate sacrifice for all the world's sins. And if you accept him and follow his teachings, your sins are covered. When you take your last breath, it'll be your first breath in heaven. Okay? So, saying all of that, through the authority of Christ, when Jesus Christ died, was crucified by the Romans, Christian theology teaches that he raises from the dead. He came back from the dead on the third day. They had a lot of eyewitnesses. It's interesting, if you read the Christian Bible as a historical document and not as something religious, it's quite interesting when you read it that way. So there were a lot of eyewitnesses that seen him come back from the dead, from the grave, and then he ascended up to heaven. But because he conquered death, because he was sinless, because he went to heaven, he has all authority. And it's through that authority that he conquered Satan, he conquered the demons, that we're able to use his authority, his name, to expel demons out of people who have them and want to be free. So, you know, Jesus said in Luke 10:19 that he's given us authority over all power of Satan. So we have that authority. We are nothing. Again, I'm speaking as Christians, Christian theology, so people can understand that I don't have any power in me. You know, I am a very, if it wasn't for Christ, I would not be going to heaven. I'm a very sinful person, and so forth. So I don't have anything in me to expel demons. They aren't afraid of me.
You're
They're
acting
only
as a middleman, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they only have to listen to the authority of Christ. They don't have to listen to anything that I say whatsoever. And so it's through, you know, the authority of Christ that we can expel these demons. Now,
So
that's
it's
very
interesting
long-winded. I apologize for that, but I wanted people to,
all right.
and you too, to understand the theology as to where do these demons come from.
Yeah, that was a perfect answer in that regard.
Yeah, and also how do they get into people? You know, we can talk about that in a little bit, but I want to pause and take any of your questions.
It's rather conspicuous, to say the least, because a lot of people tend to view demons and possession cases as merely psychological deviations, which they are, I guess, to a certain extent. But you have just said, as far as I can judge, theologically well elaborated that it's almost, it's not almost, but it's real. Like those demons, they came down from the sky and they were absolutely real and tangible in a way. And now they act to the best of their abilities to grab a hold of those weak-minded people. So it's not something, let's say, imaginative. It's not something that people get themselves into. There is a real force that's present. And this real force takes occupation of those who are susceptible to it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, you know, another aspect of Christian theology, which is it's quite interesting, is, you know, there is what's called the Trinity, which Christianity teaches that God is three entities in one. So you have God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. So there's three parts there, but they're all one. And I tell people it's like an egg. You have the white, you have the shell, you have the yolk. It's three parts of an egg, but it's still an egg. So why do I share that? Because in Christian theology, it instructs that when we were created by God, we were also created in three parts. God is three parts, so we are three parts. So we have our soul, and that is our emotions, our thoughts, and how we think and how we feel, our fantasy, all of that sort of thing. That is what's called the soul within a Christian context. There's a lot of different definitions for what a soul is. But that's one part of our being, our soul, which is typically our mind, our thoughts, our emotions, how we feel, our fantasies and imaginations. That's considered the soul. Then we have our physical body, right? Our hands, our skin, our skeletal structure, our anatomy, our muscles, our tendons, right? So that's a second part. The third part is the spirit. And that's the part of a person that lives forever. And I personally believe that when we look into the mirror, even though our bodies age, there's a part of us that we can identify with that says it's not aging, you know, and that is that spirit. And so in the Christian context, when a person dies, their spirit and their soul go with them to God for judgment. So we die, we stand before God, we have all of our thoughts, all of our memories, everything, because our soul is intact in our spirit. And so at that point, we, you know, it's, hey, have you accepted Christ and followed him? Yes, then, okay, your sins are covered through his blood, come on into heaven. And if you're not, unfortunately, you have to go to hell. That's tough to say. You know, people don't like talking about stuff like that, but that is, in not only a Christian religion, but many religions teach about hell. And God doesn't want, in Christianity, God doesn't want anyone to go to hell. That's why he sent Christ. Hell was made, and here's the kicker, here's what I'm getting at. Hell was made for Satan and the demons, where they will eventually be put in it forever by God. For their rebellion, for all the trauma and everything they've caused, Satan and the demons will be put in hell. So Satan says, if I'm going, I'm bringing you with me. I'm not going alone. So any way he can derive ways to keep people from finding Christ and serving him and getting to heaven, he'll do it. It doesn't matter what it is. And so demons enter the soul of a person. So they come into their soul, their mind, their thoughts, their emotions, their imaginations. They cannot go into the spirit of a person. That is sacred. You know, I've worked with people that said, I've given my spirit to Satan. And no, you can't. It's just, I know you think you can, but you can't. You know, I've given my soul to Satan. No, well, God created it, so I know you think you've given your soul to Satan, but really you can't do that. But the demons come into the soul. And when they're in your soul, they can vex you in many ways. They can cause severe, you name it. I mean, I just worked with a destruction. I mean, because Christ said when he was on the earth, Satan comes to steal, kill, and destroy. That's the nature of Satan. That's the nature of demons. Satan's saying, we're going to hell. You're coming with us. We're going to kill you. You're coming with us. And Christ said, I've come to give you life and give it to you more abundantly. So I want to give you life. Satan wants to kill you. Very black and white. But this is the theology of this. And so when people have demons, they will experience paranormal phenomena. And sometimes it's just they're constantly hearing voices of, you're not good enough. You'll never amount to anything. Kill yourself. And or they look in the mirror and they hear, you're fat. You're disgusting. No one's ever going to love you. And they're hearing these voices, and I'll talk about psychology in just a minute because it's definitely part of that as well. But the demons will torment people. That's their main thing that they do. So sometimes they'll come in the middle of the night and they'll cause demonic sleep paralysis where they paralyze somebody. I work with clients where they are raped by demons physically. I've spoken with people who have found themselves levitated to the ceiling. I have witnessed myself personally a lot of paranormal, supernatural phenomena because I myself had demons. This is how I got into this, because I don't want anyone to suffer the way I have. So the reason I'm an exorcist is out of compassion. I suffered for many years. one paranormal phenomena that I can mention that I've personally experienced was two people. I had a friend praying with me one time, and a demon manifested in me. Manifest means comes into my mind and can take over my body. When a demon is in your mind, also can take over your physical body. Mm-hmm. My friend was leading me in a prayer. A demon manifested within me. And when that happened, I became unconscious, but it was fully present, using my voice, my eyes, my face. According to my friend, the whole disposition changed. And it looked at my friend, and it said, "What a pretty pink shirt." And my friend had a pink shirt on. I had no clue what he was wearing. So it could see through my eyes crystal clear. The second encounter like this was with my actual exorcist, which is Dr. Bob Larson. He not only took me through my exorcism sessions, but he mentored me and trained me. He's 80 years old, and he has done over 50,000 exorcisms worldwide. He has done it in over 100 countries. He's written over 20 books. So he's
was
big
it
caliber.
him that you had sent videos of him coming to Ukraine?
Yeah, to the Ukraine,
that was
absolutely. Yeah, he loves the Ukrainian people. He goes as often as he can. But anyways, when he was taking me through a session, a demon manifested in me. Again, manifest means takes over my whole body, just everything. And he was holding a cross up, and it looked at him and said, "Get that out of my face." Take that out of my face. So it could physically see, the cross. I'm blind, just like how you and I are on, him and I were on a Zoom session. He's out in Arizona. And so anyhow, just how you and I are talking now, I mean, I can't see you. I have no clue what you look like. None whatsoever. But the demons looking through could see him perfectly fine. So those are a couple paranormal situations that I've encountered myself personally, and a lot of my clients experience these things as well. So
you had previously mentioned this phenomena of so-called sleep paralysis and how people tend to some people find themselves levitated up the ceiling, some have some kind of sexual encounters. You must have heard, I'm sure, of this phenomenon called lucid dreaming. How you go about that? It appears to be a rather common experience. Some people report being abducted by UFOs. Some people report some religious instances. Yeah, how do you explain that?
Well, from a Christian perspective, again, there are only two powers, God and Satan. So it makes it pretty easy. If someone's being abducted by aliens, it's demons that are masking as aliens. And we have worked in our network of exorcists with people who have been abducted by aliens, truly believed, and it was demons. So they went through an exorcism, the demons were expelled, and all of that stopped. So it's, we've worked with ghost hunters, where they go out with a voice box. One young lady went out to the graveyard and put the voice box down on the grave and turned it on, and a voice started speaking through to her. Well, she got demons from that. And why is that? Because in the Christian perspective, there's only two powers, Satan and God. And so she was being tormented terribly by demons, physically attacked, assaulted, complete isolation, depression. None of this was existent in this young woman until she started experimenting with that. So, no matter what it is, from a Christian perspective, we're always going to come back to two powers, God or Satan.
So even that's interesting. So you're basically saying that even if it's factually some sort of a brain activity, right? The real question to be asked is how it affects you, whether it's something positive or negative, and if it's something negative, it apparently is coming from Satan, and therefore there requires some interaction from an exorcist.
It depends. It depends, and let me clarify that, because there are psychological issues that people have that they think are demons and they're not. For example, schizophrenia, right?
That
So
would
when
superficially look a lot like demon's
absolutely
possession, right?
And you know, under Dr. Larson, we've been trained on that, you know, to be aware of the psychological issues that people may have, you know, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, you know, things like this. So, you know, I was working with a client one time, and, you know, I have intake questions that they fill out, so I can kind of look for fingerprints of demons through their life, their history. And on the intake question, you know, she did not indicate that she had schizophrenia. So I worked with her for about 3 sessions, and I wasn't seeing any release for her. She was not getting, and the same voices were there. And I said, have you ever been diagnosed with schizophrenia? And she said, yes. And I said, I really wish you would have put that on your intake form, because it would have helped me, you know, better understand what we're dealing with here. So I just encouraged her to continue with her psychiatrist, stay on her medication, because in her mind, these voices were demons, but they weren't, if that makes sense. So yeah, so there is a lot of, you know, you have to have discretion, or I should say, we've been trained to have discretion, you know, when we work with people.
How do you compare 2 images of a patient who requires a real, let's say, exorcism interception versus the one who thinks he's possessed? How would those 2 people look on surface? Any visual differences, behavior differences?
Yeah, when somebody is possessed, there are symptoms that they're going to demonstrate, you know, so they're going to have an aversion to holy things. You know, they're not going to, the demons in them aren't going to want to be around things of Christ or of, you know, crucifixion or crosses. So they just have this innate aversion, you know, to holy things. They also have a loss of time, people who are demon possessed, because when a demon manifests within them, the actual person loses consciousness when the demon takes over them. And I've worked with clients where they've lost track of time for several hours, or they wind up, you know, in a different part in the house and don't remember getting there. So loss of time, you know, aversion to, you know, things that are holy. The other thing I mentioned was, you know, the sleep paralysis, you know, things like this. So, and, you know, it's the history as well is very important of a person. If they have a history of
proclivities towards certain,
yeah, very much so. So like if somebody's father, you know, had schizophrenia and the grandfather had schizophrenia and the great grandfather, then we know this is not going to be demons, as an example. Or somebody on may have a history of addiction, you know, and psychologically it's looked at, which is true, that it is, you know, dysfunctional patterns passed on from generation to generation. But as an exorcist, we take that a bit further and say, yes, we acknowledge that this is psychological dysfunction passed on to family to family through generations. But we go a step farther and say that this is a curse on the family that's being passed on.
And there are certain categories of those demons. I may have heard something that somehow sometimes some demons, so to speak, categorize the ones that try to destabilize your family, the ones that affect your career, the ones that hit your addictions. Is there types of demons in that regard?
Yeah, there are common demons that we come across, and it's interesting to compare notes with Catholic exorcists because they have the same demons that we come across, which is quite interesting. So yeah, there are categories of demons or demons that have specific names that, you know, we come in contact with quite regularly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and if a person, say, is suffering with a known vice, I would call it a vice, alcoholism, for example, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that person would potentially benefit more from going to an exorcist other than seeking some medical help, that sort of thing? How would one go about distinguishing who to refer to?
Yeah. That's an excellent question. It really is. And for those listening, I will tell you that I do have a podcast you can listen to. It's called The Blind Exorcist. You can listen to it on your favorite podcast
I think
app.
that's how I've come across you, honestly. I think you've been interviewed by someone, and I reached out like that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so anyhow, it's the Blind Exorcist podcast. But on there, I think from day one, I've always said it has to be a combination of psychology and exorcism. It's rare that it's just one. So, in our Western minds, everything's psychological. There are not demons. There is no supernatural realm. I think that's a grave mistake, because there's a lot of people suffering who have tried everything psychologically and nothing has worked. And they may in fact have demons, but have been told that these aren't real, this doesn't exist. And then there's the other side where people say, I have demons, and just go to an exorcist. And, that's why we make sure up front that we're not looking at schizophrenia, and things like that. So I believe in your case of like alcoholism, it absolutely needs to be both, or at least it should start medically. Get in a 12-step program. Work the steps. See if you can get off whatever the addiction might be. And if you cannot, and you've tried everything you can, then perhaps it could be demons, and see an exorcist. That's kind of the way I approach it.
Yeah, that appears smart. Now, in your observation, is attending an exorcist frowned upon in society, in modern civilization, let's say?
It depends. I really think it depends, because it's becoming more common now. Psychologists and therapists are starting to recognize that there is authentic demon possession. And I know therapists who, when they identify this, they refer them out to exorcists, and they work very closely with the exorcist. So it's a therapeutic, in other words, the therapist isn't an exorcist, so he's not going to know how to handle that. So he will refer them out to an exorcist, and they work as a team. So this is starting to become more commonplace. It's not like the most common thing, but I have seen this, and it's getting more. I just read an article a couple months ago. I wish I still had it, where psychiatry, in fact, truly is starting to recognize that, demon possession is real. They see it. When a client's sitting across from them and they sense a deep, dark change in the atmosphere, and the client's eyes dilate completely black, where the whites of their eyes are gone. And when you look into the eyes of evil, you know it. And their disposition changes, and their voice changes, and it speaks through the person. And that psychiatrist gets chills clear up and down their spine, down goosebumps all over their arms. They know they're looking at a demon. And so that's why they refer them out to get help in that regard.
Oh yeah, obviously, if something like that does not serve as a great reason to resort to an exorcist, then I don't know what would. But
okay. Another way, like for me personally, I know for me, I had severe anxiety. I mean severe anxiety. I tried every anxiety medication ever created, and not a single thing helped, period. When I went through my exorcism sessions, my possession was very severe. I went for 14 months, pretty much on a weekly basis, sometimes every other week, but I had a lot because I started when I was 48. And so through my exorcism sessions at a certain point in time, all of my anxiety, every addiction I ever had, 100% legitimately stopped, as if I've never had it, never had it. I suffered with anxiety probably, 25 years. And so that's another sign that I tell people, like, if you've tried everything psychologically and nothing seems to help, like when you take anxiety medication, it should help you. It may not fully take it away, but it should make it tolerable where you're not crippled with anxiety and, things like this. But if you've tried everything there is to try and nothing's helping, who's to say it may not be demons? It's not going to hurt anything to go with and go see an exorcist.
I imagine it will take a lot of open-mindedness and flexibility of people's way of thinking. A lot of people would just restrict themselves to start with. From something like
and sometimes people just say, well, this is what I got, this is the best it's going to get. I worked with a client a couple weeks ago. He was in complete isolation. Oh, this is amazing. This all brings me to tears. 26 years old, complete isolation, can't come out of the bedroom. He's unkept, has not bathed in weeks. Suicidal, completely depressed. And he came to me for help. And I took that young man through an exorcism. And there were definitely demons present and that were causing him to suffer in this way. They were expelled through the authority of Christ. I can't do this on my own, right? Like I was saying. I strongly encouraged him afterwards, go for counseling to now work through your trauma. Demons enter through trauma, by the way. We can touch on that if you want. But I said, go to counseling. So I kept after him. You got to get in counseling now because the demons are expelled, causing the isolation, the depression, the suicidal thoughts. But now you got to go for therapy to work through the traumas. And he did. And he did, and he stuck with it, and now today he has a full-time job. He's moved out of his parents' house, he's in his own apartment, and he's preparing to go to college to be a computer programmer. And he wants to work in the cloud, so he's studying, he's working, he's happy, he's interactive. It's a beautiful story of the power of combining exorcism with therapy. It's remarkable.
Nice. What is up with the cross? Does the cross serve as merely, and I don't want to say merely like it's something little.
I understand.
But is it just the cross being a symbol and representation of Jesus, or is there some other reason, or rather an obvious reason?
Yeah. It is the defeat of Satan on the cross. That is what bothers demons. Not all demons are bothered by that. It depends on how powerful they are, how strong they are. A lot of them are. We put the cross on someone's forehead, and I mean instant manifestation, and sometimes not so much. But yeah, basically it is a representation of the defeat of Satan, and they cannot stand that. It's the theology of Christianity is that, God created Adam and Eve, man and woman, perfect, in the garden with him. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about this. If you haven't, you can read it, the Garden of Adam and Eve. And Satan comes and tempts them. They eat forbidden fruit and allow sin into the world, and we're all under a curse of sin and death. That's why we die. Originally, we're supposed to live with God in this garden and live a good life. And so Christ came, died on that cross, and now we have a way out of the sin and the death cycle through Christ and accepting him as a savior and so forth. So it's the defeat of that sinful curse that's on all mankind that drives the demons nuts. They can't stand that they were that stupid to crucify the Savior and cause their own demise, their own defeat. So there's a lot of anger and torment inside of demons when you hold that cross up, because it represents, number one, you're the idiots who put them up on the cross, and secondly, you lost the power of sin and death. We have a way out of your system now. So that's why it really can get them kind of crazed.
That's the weak spot, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Rub it in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Being an exorcist, are you annoyed by all these numerous movies that keep coming out, and some of them are good, majority of them are bad? What's your attitude to those?
I mean, it's Hollywood, right? Hollywood's out to make money, and they always have been. I mean, when I was sighted, I watched the original Exorcist movie filmed in the 70s, where the girl's head spinned around and, you know, she's vomiting out green pea soup, and at the
Is
end,
that too far off?
They do vomit, because when they come inside of a person, when I say come inside, meaning manifest. Remember, demons will come into your mind, and when they're in there, they can control your voice, your body, they can control your thoughts, they can, compulsion is a huge attribute, behavior to demons, always compelling you to do something, but they will vomit. And sometimes they do that when they're being expelled, just because they're under such intense pain themselves. And other times they will do that just to kind of annoy us, kind of frustrate us. And it smells quite putrid.
Yeah, I imagine. Well, I don't, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because it's a demonic induced vomiting, so it's it's quite interesting. I get very frustrated and annoyed with them. I maybe it's because I can't see them, but like some of my sighted exorcists that I work with, they'll see things like a person's jaw completely unhinged and then come over and touch their right ear, and they're having to look at this, and I'm there, taking these spirits on with them and demons on and not even fazed by it. Or they'll see someone's head spin like literally completely around in between their shoulder blades, looking at them with their eyes back in their head and foaming at the mouth. And
that. Wow.
No, this happens. This happens.
So when that happens, is it some sort of, it's obviously a demonic embodiment, right? But yes. I'm just saying that humanly it's not possible. So the demon alters physical traits somehow.
Yeah, they can do that. Yeah, they can manipulate the body in ways that we as humans cannot.
And so if that happens to, sorry for interrupting, but if that happens to a victim, does that victim, once the demon is chased away, is the victim even capable of continue living, or no injuries?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the demons, when they are expelled, I mean, a person's head's going to be back to normal. And they could have some pain, from what had happened to them, but no, I mean, they're not going to, it can be painful, but damaged permanently, exactly. And the reason they do these things is because they know
to impress.
Well, not to impress, but to terrify. And the reason they want to use fear to stop this is because they don't want expelled. And so if they can put on a show to intimidate their enemy, which is Christ in us, the exorcist, they hate to look at us. Because when we force them to keep their eyes open and look at us, and it burns. They hate it. Because when they look at us, because we have Christ in us, it just burns. So it's a fight. It is a fight. I've been in exorcism sessions that have lasted 8 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many people do those include in the room?
We usually work at least with two. 2 people. Yeah. Yeah.
I imagine because I must have seen probably every single one of those films, and somebody has got to hold the possessed.
Yes. That's another sign you at. Yep. I apologize. I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Yeah, that was it.
That's another sign of possession is supernatural strength.
Right.
You know, you got a 5'2" woman, very thin, and 5 men that are huge can barely, you know, contain her. And I was being interviewed by a gal a couple months ago, and maybe that's the one you've seen. I don't remember, but she said, yeah, but there are women who can go lift a car like when a child's underneath.
Yeah,
and that's true, but there, you know, there's a difference. Believe me, demonic supernatural strength is very real, and it is a sign that we look for. But that's why normally we'll have 2 exorcists, and we do those intake questions, and based on those intake questions, we get a good sense of what demons are going to be there. And if they are violent, then yes, we bring people to help restrain, you know, if we're doing it in person. I worked yesterday, as a matter of fact, with another exorcist team, and we had a professional boxer, a heavyweight professional boxer that had come for an exorcism. And
it must have been menacing for life.
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, so you had better believe we had brought some big boys there to restrain him. Yeah.
Must have been a whole boxing match with a demon.
Yes. Yes.
Wow. So you've already mentioned certain outstanding cases. However, the bottom line of the most, I'm not afraid of saying, traumatizing and mind-blowing cases that you've had to go through yourself, what would that be? Any one particular exorcism that has always stood out to you?
I wouldn't know. There isn't any that, because it's normal for me, so nothing really stands out, if that makes sense. You know, I've worked with clients who have had scratch marks and bite marks, you know, from demons physically on their body. You know, I mean, so there are these paranormal, you know, objects moving, you know, like glasses across.
Moving or straight up flying?
Yeah, flying. Yeah.
Flying.
And lights coming off and on. Like, that's another interesting thing. Like, we cleanse homes because houses can be possessed, not just humans, which is kind of interesting. So a lot of times we'll have to go through houses to cleanse them because there was a murder in the home. There might have been a suicide in the home. There could be occultic, satanic rituals performed on the grounds. There could be Indian burial sites where there's shamans and people buried there. So you get a lot of, you know, demonic activity. And so, you know, people will contact us and say, you know, I have a ghost in my house and can you come help? And you know, it goes back to what I said originally in a Christian, you know, paradigm. There's only 2 powers, Satan and God. That's it. So, you know, as exorcists, as Christian exorcists, we don't believe in ghosts. They are demons. You know, we believe as a Christian that when someone dies, their soul and their spirit go in front of God. They're not left on the earth roaming around. So when people say, I see my grandfather sitting in the chair for me, that's not grandfather. That's a demon. And they can shapeshift. That's one thing demons can do. They can shapeshift into anything they want. I worked with a woman that was interviewed. Sorry, not worked with. Well, actually, I have worked with her a few times. But she was in astral projection, and she would leave her body and go out into other planes of existence, and she could, see and hear, what her neighbors were doing, and all these. And this sort of stuff is real, man. I mean, this is what, people get involved in. But it's normally when someone decides to become a Christian that the arts that they're using and practicing turn on them in a very vicious way. As long as they're not serving Christ, the demons are fine. As soon as they turn to Christ, then all hell breaks loose. Because they put a lot of investment in that person to get them to go to hell. Because remember, Satan's philosophy, if I'm going, you're going. So if they have someone practicing arts that allow the demons to be in them, and then someone becomes a Christian, they're gonna go nuts, and that's when they contact us. So, just throwing some more stuff out there to tickle your audience's fancy.
That's it. Do you use spells?
Do I use spells?
Yeah.
No,
by spells, I mean verbal,
We primarily do curse breaking, and we here, let me explain from a Christian perspective how this happens. A demon just can't enter you. It has to have a legal right to enter you. So if I pulled out a contract, I wish I had a piece of paper, but say I pull out a piece of paper, okay, and it's a contract. And I say to you, your name is Bowden? Is it?
Yep.
Okay, I'm just checking because the screen reader I use oftentimes speaks people's names incorrectly.
No, that was good. That was good. Strangely, people that could read it perfectly mispronounced it. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's Bowden and Justin. So say I pull out a contract, and I say Bowden. I lay down the contract, and I write some terms on it. Now, I'm talking this is like a spiritual contract, right? People don't realize this, but a demon just can't enter you. It has to have a legal right through things we've interacted with, whether ignorantly or willfully. It has to have a legal right, an open door to come into a person's mind, to their soul. So I lay out a contract, and I lay out terms. I say, if you visit a psychic, and if you use tarot cards, and if you participate in seances, and I'm writing out this contract, I have a legal right to enter you. So I lay this contract down in front of you. Bowden says, well, I'm going to go to a psychic and get a reading and see what, well, you've signed the contract there next to the psychic. Boom. You open the door, you have a demon from the psychic. You don't know that. But
I believe that's what is commonly referred to as selling your soul to the devil. Lots of celebrities, maybe it's a little bit of a different thing, but a lot of celebrities get blamed for selling their souls to the devil. Maybe that's more of a
they made a contract. But they have a legal agreement. So that's how demons enter people. Is they just can't enter people, and so that's why, like, when people work in some of the arts, like Wicca, like shamanism and things like this, energy healing, a lot of times these arts, people really sincerely want to help people. They're not practicing these arts because they're evil people. They sincerely believe that they can help people and so forth. And what happens is they don't understand that they're opening up doors, legal agreements for demons. They think that they're spirit guides. They think that they're, familiars, that they're helping, that they're gifted, they have special abilities, and these sorts of things. But really what's happening from a Christian perspective is it's all deception, because demons can shapeshift into everything. And so, we work with people who come out of Wicca and they have demons from the practices. We work with people. I just interviewed an energy healer that went through an exorcism. That's my latest podcast, Another girl that used mindfulness meditation and the law of attraction to attract, her future lover to her, got demons from doing this. Yeah. Up till that point, she was fine. She just didn't think there was anything wrong. She didn't know. And you can check that out on my podcast. It's called Phoebe's Story, From Spiritual Exploration to Exorcism.
Those people who use all sorts of attraction meditations, or I don't know if a prayer is applicable here, they are bound to get some kind of entity on themselves. I've always been skeptical
and a lot of people, yes, absolutely. And a lot of people who practice what the big broad category is New Age practices, there's so many, but they themselves identify that there are what they call bad entities, that come inside of a person and begin to torment them. But really, from a Christian perspective, it's demons, and they come to us. They come to us. I was at a show here in our area. It was an art show. A friend of mine and I went. He has a product that he sells, and he goes around to different festivals, and we had went and. We had happened to be placed right next to Satanists who were displaying art and Wiccans, and here we are. He's also got advertisement out about exorcism and if you need help, So we're in the midst of all these people that, seemingly have these opposite belief systems, and it was a wonderful experience to be there, because they would come up and ask us questions, and we would talk and share with them. And I think that's what's important. I think a lot of people who have practices that maybe are considered demonic in the Christian universe need to understand that not all Christians are out there, bashing people and screaming and arguing. It takes a person who's emotionally well to work well with people. I have friends who are Muslim, and we sit down and we talk about the differences of our religions intellectually. I mean, I'm not there to convert them. They're not there to convert me, but we better understand, our religions. So
do you think exorcism should be more spread? Would you like more people to be more cognizant of what it really is?
I really do, because it actually, for the most part, exorcism is a very gentle process.
Unlike to what is shown in films.
Exactly, yeah, very brutal. Most of the exorcisms, we just converse the way you and I are right now. When it comes time to expel the demons, that's when things can get a little bit spicy. But outside of that, it's a very gentle process. It's very hard on the demons. It's more hard on them than it is on the person. And so I think Hollywood in some ways has glorified exorcism as, some over-the-top, and it puts fear in people. And, it's a shame, because I do think that people can be helped through this. Again, back to my point where people have tried everything in psychology, maybe even in some of the different New Age practices to get better. And no matter what, they just can't get better. And that's what I always tell people. If you've tried everything you can try, and I'm just sharing this even with your audience, if you tried everything you can try and nothing is shifting permanently, like, the placebo effect where you feel good for a little bit, then you got to go try something different because now you feel bad again. Then you go try that and you feel bad. And then, like, nothing's really shifting. I would encourage you to consider, getting in touch with a Christian exorcist who has been trained and certified and is, under someone. There's so many people. I mean, Bowden, you and I could throw up our own YouTube channel right now and be like, hey, we can heal anyone, pay us $100 and, have no training whatsoever and can really damage people. So, if you are open-minded to an exorcism, I would encourage you to consider, Dr. Bob Larson, his website's boblarson.org, or you can go to my website because I've been trained by him, justind.com, and I work with people for free all the time who can't afford to pay. So, that it's always an option. So if you're watching this and you're like, I don't know, man, maybe I should look into this. Those are some great resources. The Catholic Church also has good exorcists as well, that can help. So, be open.
Yeah, I'll definitely be sure to list the links to your channel and all the provided links. I've always said this thing, it's like these days I've again repeatedly said that there appear to be a lot of Misters know-it-all people that are seemingly experts in every field, and I've always kind of despised those guys, whether it be, well, I guess, so here's my stance honestly on religion. I have repeatedly stated it, but I have not yet come to that point when I can absolutely and utterly claim that I am a religious and devoted follower of certain religion, yet I am definitely by no means an atheist. And I find those people that claim they know something for 100%. I've got certain questions regarding that, particularly atheists, because it's, to me, the concept of disproving something must always imply the probability of changing your stance. And a lot of those atheist non-believers, they appear to be so ironclad fixed in certain beliefs that nothing would possibly ever change their stance. And religious people likewise. I think religious people the same, although with religious people it's a little bit different because their religion literally dictates them, tells them to never abandon it, right? Because that would then otherwise completely contradict their whole previous practice. So that's okay. But I've always said that regarding exorcism particularly. I said, yeah, you can be the most, let's say, educated and reasonable and rational and logical person in the world. As soon as objects start flying in your room, pardon my language, as soon as shit hits the fan, you don't know what the hell to do. You know where you're going to go. You ain't going to a psychologist. You ain't going to your mentor. You're probably going to head to the nearest church because, it's not like every day knives are flying in your kitchen and weird and unexplained stuff is happening. And it's important to keep yourself open-minded, right, to certain probabilities.
Yeah, it's hard for people. I mean, I'm a software engineer, so I'm a very, very critical thinker. One of the main reasons I'm an exorcist and I believe in exorcism was because of my own personal experience. But had I not had demons, it's hard to tell, because I am very analytical, and most people are trapped in the tangible, what you can see, taste, smell, touch, and anything beyond that, there's always an answer. There's all like, okay, so the lights shut off in the house on their own. Oh, there's an answer. Well, it had to have been, a breaker tripped. So let me go to the breaker box. The breaker's not tripped. Well, maybe the bulb's burns out. Then they walk to go check the bulb, and then the lights come back on. And then they stand there and they think, well, there has to be a reason. Maybe the power went out. Well, no, the lights aren't blinking. The clock on the microwave is not blinking. It's still set to the correct time. Well, I don't know, but there has to be a reason. So when they come across things like that they can't explain through logic, they just dismiss it as, I don't know, and then they move on. But what they really need to do is say, now, wait a minute. Is it possible that what just happened could be supernatural? Because not everything does have a logical answer. A lot of the times it does, but not always. And it's in those times when you don't have an answer through logic that you should contemplate and think, is there really a supernatural realm? And that's how I encourage people who are very critical thinkers and and things like that, because I personally believe that most people, not all, But most people have experienced something supernatural in their life.
Sure.
And sometimes, multiple times, and sometimes people are just afraid and they don't want to admit it, so they just deny it and reject it. And other times it's just people can't find a logical reason as to why something's happened, so they just dismiss it and move on. But it's important, I think, for people to understand that, you know, there is a supernatural realm. If we look historically at all countries, all cultures, from the beginning, people have worshipped gods. The artwork, the paintings, you know, the ceremonies, everything. So it's like, you know, how can we just exclude all of that and say, you know what, there is no supernatural realm? They were just old and archaic, and they were, you know, not as intelligent as we are now in today's times. You know, no, I think people do experience a lot of paranormal situations, and it's, you know, there are poltergeists. They are real. You know, we deal with them. And poltergeist just means, you know, demons that harass inside of a home. And that happens. It absolutely does.
Those films and stories and books, though called fiction, could not have been based on nothing. They could not have been based on an absolute far-fetched supposition by some author with a rampant fantasy. You know, something must have sparked all of those stories. Something powerful. Right. Last but not least, have you ever been scared in your practice?
I think initially starting, yes. Growing into understanding the true authority of Christ took a little bit of time for me in the beginning. But once I really began to see the authority of Christ over these demons, and that they had to submit to that authority and be expelled out of a person, the fear dissipated. It very quickly went away, because you realize that there is supreme power in the authority in Christ. So, yeah. And like I said, you know, I can't see these things anyhow. You know, I always laugh at my sighted exorcist. I wouldn't call them colleagues, but, you know. You know.
Those unlucky ones.
Yeah, telling them, oh, you little baby, are you going to be afraid? You know, I'll tease them like that.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. It's all perspective, right? And as soon as you change, you shift your perspective, that's it. It's a powerful thing, and some people lack certain inner strength to even shift the perception, and it's sad. And it is sad because at the end of the day, everything is difficult. It's difficult to be passive and not to take an active stance. It's difficult to be active and do something. And here in Ukraine, it's especially evident and actual as it's never been before. And I think it's like that in a lot of aspects of our life, in a lot of lives, multitudes. Nonetheless, the pleasure is mine. I'm truly grateful. We have finally recorded. We have slightly stepped over 1 hour. I hope that is not of a problem. I hope that is not of a problem. And my mouse is just disconnected.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate you having me on.
Yes, it's been an amazing episode. Thank you very much, sir. I'll be sure to drop it probably tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Yes.